Hi, and welcome to AzureTracks video podcast series. Today, we're here to talk a little bit deeper about Microsoft Cloud DNS and some of the additional details to build on top of a previous podcast. So I'm Andrew Lowes, and I'm a cloud architect and implementer. I work with Microsoft 365 Azure, and I help businesses implement cloud integrated solutions. So thank you again for watching our little podcast and tuning in to listen, depending on where you're connected to us, of course. So with all of that said, with me, I have my good friend, Ryan McKay. Thank you again for joining me. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I'm Ryan McKay. I'm a cloud transformation architect, and I too work with Microsoft technologies. I work with them to assist businesses to use hybrid cloud technologies to solve business problems. And the last time you joined us, we were talking about DNS and how DNS is really the blueprint of everything that you need to start your cloud journey. And we spoke about some of the records, that are needed and for the different services, but we really wanted to dive a little bit deeper in that today, which is why we're here.
Absolutely. So I've shared my screen out here, and maybe Ryan, if you want to just kind of run through a bit of a recap of what we covered. We were, I think, just to refresh our own memories as well, we were talking about, adding a domain into Microsoft Office 365 for the purposes of all things M365. So that was the full coverage. So did you want to kind of give us like the hyperspeed rundown on that?
Yeah, so there's a number of entries that you needed to have. I mean, first and foremost, you need to prove that you actually owned the domain that you were trying to add into your M365 admin console, and that's facilitated by adding a text entry. And then from there, various services within the M365 stack require different DNS entries, whether that be MX records, SPF records, DKIM records for something such as Exchange Online. And then a number of different records needed to be added in relation to the Microsoft Teams Skype for Business services, and also for MDM services in Intune.
Absolutely, yeah. So last time we kind of talked about a bit of an emphasis on Exchange records and kind of the different flavors, migration, kind of when we flip things for mail flow, that's a DNS change as well. And we also talked kind of a little bit about the SIP records and the serve records for voice over IP. And I think, like you were saying last time, I think it's kind of fun because they have an emphasis coming from the history of Microsoft products with Link and Link Online when SIP really kind of started to take off worldwide within our Microsoft ecosystems. Then it evolved into Skype and Skype for Business, to kind of the consumer and then the business flavor. And then now we're at Teams, and Teams has really taken off very, very, I'm going to say, timely and almost magically, because it's really supporting us through working remotely and working anywhere. But it also enables you and I to do some cool things like this. So we get to use Teams for our recordings.
Absolutely.
And I love it. So I guess kind of from the basics, we kind of did drop the old Azure DNS surprise bomb in there last time. But let's talk a little bit about Azure DNS. So Azure DNS is really the DNS service that we recommend businesses to be using. Certainly, there's lots of different ones, and we're not going to say that you have to use anything. That's not what we're here to do. We're here to say, this is what we like, and this is what we don't like. We're pretty honest about these things. Yeah. So
Azure, using a service, using Azure DNS specifically, just ensures maximum compatibility and a smooth experience when working with other Microsoft services. So that's
Absolutely.
why we like it and recommend it.
I like it because it all goes back to the same invoice for the company. So if I need to buy a new domain, I can actually do it right inside Azure. And, you know, I don't have to use my credit card or my corporate card or whatever your arrangement is and then do all the bill backs and expense forms. Nope, it's just part of your Azure bill. It's a thing of beauty.
It just makes it quick, easy, and you know what? As an admin, the replication is like that, so it's nice and fast.
Right. Exactly. So of course, you know, yeah. So we kind of like to showcase some of the cool things about Azure and Microsoft clouds in general. Kind of the world in between is our sweet spot, and Azure DNS private zones. Really cool. It's simple and it's super secure. And you can use named services, DNS named services inside of VNet, but you don't have to have external DNS for that necessarily. You can keep it as a private and internal zone. So there's some cool stuff that you can do with Azure DNS. And certainly, like you said, you know, we definitely should call out there's no waiting. So as we know, there's lots of other third-party services that are good. They're pretty quick, but with Azure DNS, it's freaking instant. It really is. And we're not selling, we're not getting a commission here. It's easier, so we like it. So with that said, I'm going to say, how do we do a DNS zone? How do we use Azure DNS? Well, I'm going to jump to this Microsoft doc. Here, let me scroll up a little bit. I just kind of want to show, you know, we use Microsoft Docs for all of our learning examples and everything. You know, we're, you know, no different than anybody else. We fumble through life quite difficultly some days. We're functionally illiterate sometimes, I think I am.
Some days more than others. We're bumbling through life. Absolutely.
Exactly. But, you know, we follow Microsoft Docs for the guidance. You know, those teams at Microsoft work really, really hard to keep these up to date. They do an awesome job. I'd like to just say that. Thank you. Because I rely on the docs quite heavily, especially as things change. And I know it's a little off topic, but you may have seen a LinkedIn post I did from this morning talking about the rapid pace of change in the cloud, and certifications are now finally catching up with that. And I'm kind of excited. And the reason I thought of that is because tying in things to Microsoft Learn and Microsoft Docs, they're always being updated. It's always different. And think of the times we go into either Azure portal or the M365 portal to go in and do something as an admin. And lo and behold, we go to show the customer with a screen share, look how awesome, easy this is. Oh man, it's moved. Just give me a sec.
Yeah.
So they're always updating things. It's a constant state of evolution, and that's a reflection of the advancing products and services, I think, that are in there. So with all of that said, to use Azure DNS is super easy. And I'm just going to kind of go through this Microsoft doc because I thought, you know what, for the sake of a 5-minute conversation, I didn't want to build out a whole demo for it. Although maybe in a future podcast, we do a little bit of these things, and we could call it times when Andrew could have built a demo.
And one thing to call out, Andrew, is that URL, and it's really easy to remember. DNS get started portal. That's all you gotta search.
That's good. Yeah, I remember we were talking about that just as we were hitting the record button here today, and then here I went and forgot. So the importance of making notes, I suppose. That's okay. We're all human. So we create the DNS zone we add the resource. We're going to go to networking and then DNS zone. We're going to add that. And then as you can see, it's really quite simple. You create the zone. You're going to wait about 30 seconds or something for it to go in. And then it's going to ask you to start entering records. So really, now you're going to enter your A records. You're going to point at your different servers. And it's going to look an awful lot like every other kind of DNS you've worked with before from other providers.
And very handy. You're likely, as an admin, you're likely in the M365 admin portal or the Azure admin portal anyway. So what's nice about this, and again, you know, we're flogging the wares a little bit, but what's nice about this is now I don't have to go to my password vault and find my third-party, you know, DNS account and password. You know, log into that. And
yeah, that's a really good point. It's a native product within the Azure services stack, right? So it's just available in your portal. That's a really good point. I actually hadn't thought about talking about that. Good thinking.
just dawned on me. It was like this temporary brilliance moment I had, but it is handy as an admin, you mouse clicks and, going through different processes, being able to streamline that to save time so you can work on other things is very important. And this particular service helps streamline, those work items for when you're going in and doing these sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things that are important to point out. So the same as any other DNS change, you're going to do this in your bloody dev test subscription first. You're not going to do this in production. For the love of Pete, folks. Test tenant, test tenant, test tenant. Can't emphasize that enough. Also, it is important to have a testing subscription for that kind of stuff where you're learning or hands-on, because that's where you want to do your previews as well. So when you have Azure preview products that you want to test out or try, you have to do that in a non-prod environment. And I talk about this all the time in all of the different medias that I participate in because it's so important. One of the big problems that I see an awful lot, more than I'd like to, in Azure prod environments is somebody's deployed something and it was in preview and then it stops working. Well, the reason it stopped working is because it went to GA or general availability. And a lot of times you have to redeploy when Microsoft changes it from preview to general availability. It will either continue to work, but not quite. You might be given a timeout on it and might say, okay, we're going to give you 4 weeks to transition over, or it just completely stops and you're kind of dead in the water. That's why it's important. They tell you, don't use this in your production environment.
Well, and Microsoft kind of breaks the IT moniker that there's nothing more permanent than a temporary solution. In Azure, that temporary solution might not have permanence, so you really need to plan that out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's part of proper architecture, and why we encourage our clients to just engage frequently to just get those health checks, make sure their admins are trained up fully, but also still following best practices. Those audits really valuable for companies, and I'm talking about small and medium business here as well, not just applicable to large enterprise.
Absolutely.
I find that mid layer is really the biggest problem spots. They hide so easily because they have maybe fewer staff. Everybody's working really hard and they're really good at their jobs, but they just don't have time to circle back for best practices. Yeah. So that's where, I would recommend my good friend Ryan for things like that. But we're not here to talk about awesome workplace habits. So as you make your DNS changes.
So we've got a really elegant solution available to us with Azure DNS. Which is a perfect segue to circle back to the entries that we have. And Andrew has this amazing document that Microsoft provides, for us as admins for all of the Microsoft 365 and Office 365 URLs and IP ranges that you want to look at and make sure not only is your DNS set up, and the document will have that. But as your firewalls and whatnot ready, for all the different services and the connections to the services. Now, if you're 100% cloud environment, this sort of thing is important, but is not as important because that's managed in the background. But traditional hybrid environments have a mix of on-prem and cloud resources, and that's where a document like this really comes in handy. So. Andrew, why don't you take us through this document?
Awesome. Yeah. So anybody with a corporate environment that has a physical premises probably deals with this. If you're doing a private data center or hybrid data center or hybrid to Azure environment, you're going to have corporate firewalls of whatever flavor in place. And you're going to have some complex configuration in there. So there's a reason that networking professionals are
our friends.
Their own segment of professionals. These folks are wicked smart. And, sometimes we do take them for granted a little bit, I have to admit, because they operate in the background. And it's like It's like the help desk. It's like the doctor's office, the network professionals there with me as well. You don't go typically and check in with them unless something is feeling sick. So
yeah, exactly. And especially in this cloud journey, this document and whatnot is evidence that as cloud technologists, as cloud administrators, we need to work very closely with our network professionals to ensure, that the services are delivered to our end clients.
Exactly. So how we do that is with 365 and Office 365 in particular, we have a list of white list requirements for IPs and URLs. So we can monitor that through RSS, and that's important. And we're going to kind of circle around to why in a second here. So I want to talk about this next page, and I've already opened it because, look at this. To most of us, this is going to look a lot like gibberish. To a network professional, they're going, oh, great, somebody probably put this in the right format for me. Finally, thank you. Well, that was Microsoft, but I just kind of want to give the example of look how much I'm scrolling through here. So this is just for Exchange Online, the things that we need to make sure we have whitelisted. So lots of ranges, there's some URLs and IP ranges, and then we have TCP ports, we'll have UDP ports for certain things here as well. And as I kind of get through these different services, SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, well, here we go. Skype for Business and Online and Microsoft Teams. And, we were talking at the start of this podcast and in the last podcast about some of the kind of intricate things about DNS and specific configuration. So this is all about lookups, right? So DNS uses IP addresses. It's like the phone number, and then the name is the DNS name, server names, resource names, things like that. But we need to have IP addressing, we need to have port numbers, and we need to have those URL names all kind of buttoned together to make all these lookups work. So without kind of getting into how DNS works as a basics, go and look that up on Bing or, Wikipedia or something like that, and take a look at the basics of it if you're not familiar with it, because it is good to understand it. But that said, I want to talk a bit more about Teams, Ryan. So Teams requires all of these things here to be allowed.
Oh, yeah.
How does it impact us? Is this really necessary? This seems like a lot.
It may seem like a lot, but it is absolutely necessary. Again, we've spoken about, identity is sort of the foundation of what you're doing in the cloud, and DNS is sort of the blueprint. Well, with that blueprint with DNS is, this network component, right? The firewalls are included in that and whatnot. When this is neglected, and I'm going to tell you a very personal story that did actually happen to me. We had a very important Teams session going on at a corporate client. We had, people joining from all over Western Canada into client's tenant. And during the meeting, about 15 minutes in, there was some switching that was being undertaken in the background. Because again, Microsoft Teams is a managed service, so it's managed by Microsoft in the background. And what had happened was because of the switching that had happened in the background, the video traffic was being rerouted within the Microsoft network, as we found out, from our traditional North American site out through sites in Asia. Well, unfortunately, in hindsight, after analysis, after the event, we didn't have any of those Asian IP ranges whitelisted in our environment. So ultimately, what happened was the video feed went down. Right in the middle, of course, of because Mr. Murphy always comes to play, right in the middle of a very important individual's speech, with 120, 150 people watching. So the good news is we were able to complete the event in Microsoft Teams. Unfortunately, we had to complete the event without any video. It was audio only. So
let's break that down just a little bit. I just want to kind of dissect that just for a moment, because I think this is really interesting. So we hear our users and different online communities talk a lot about video lag or things like that, right? So this is a good example because in this case, that conference's video went down because of routing challenges in your corporate firewall, because you were missing some of these configurations for the whitelisting. Yeah. And like you said, it's a managed service. So Microsoft had a problem with perhaps their North American video routing for whatever reason. They took care of it in the background, automatically rerouted to offshore in Asia somewhere. And instead of having video lag for a moment while it resynchronized, you had a complete video disconnect, but your audio service was broken out and it continued on just fine. And I thought it was important to kind of touch on that because this is how it impacts us in real life, right? So this is real world Azure, real world Microsoft right here. And it's not just Microsoft, it's other services, of course, too, that would do this kind of thing. But in our case, we have all of these kind of gold standard documents from Microsoft Docs to help us understand how we can make things work properly. But as you know, we were just talking about admins being really busy. They don't have time. And I think in this case with network admins, of course, it's the same thing. They are strapped like everyone else is right now, right? We're stretched thinner than we ever have been before. But we can do a couple things, right? So we can, I just want to hop back to this other tab. We can take the RSS URL. We can add it to Microsoft Outlook. That can be done on your phone or on your desktop, whatever flavor you use. And you can get an alert when it changes. You can have one of, cool guys like us. I like using Azure Runbooks for stuff to monitor RSS and send me an email because I'm old school and weird that way. I still like my emails for notifications. But I am switching over to Teams a little bit more and more as time goes on. And sometimes it's nice to get those alerts into a channel feed, right? Yeah. So we can do all kinds of neat stuff. And I think actually there is an add-in built in with Teams for RSS in one of the tabs already. I remember using it once. I'm just not thinking of it at the moment. But there's different ways, right? So, the thing, and we talked about this before our recording just briefly, but I think it's important that we as administrators support each other, and that means our network admins too. So if our network admin needs a bit of help to monitor this, I mean, it can be as simple as getting an email and I can forward that email. That's not tough. Yeah. So, let's support each other through these difficult times. And certainly these configurations aren't easy, right? This is a bit complicated, and it's important that we do get all of these white listings in because it supports the full stack of Microsoft 365 services. You see in here a lot of them AzureEdge.net, and you know what? These are all CDNs, content distribution networks, and it means that they're helping to break apart those streams. So some are audio, some are video, some might be static, they might be different things. And we need to be able to access our corporate resources, but also to teleconference and video conference with each other. I want to say reliably.
And what we found in this particular situation was this was a new setting that we were not aware of because we hadn't checked the updates recently. And that was a learning opportunity for the team that I was a part of, moving forward. So that's why this document is so important and is, a document that I refer to quite often in my practice, and something I'm very much aware of as I'm administering into environments.
Exactly, right. So the world of hybrid is full of these little kind of intricacies. And we want to make it easy, but the setup to make it easy is usually not quite so easy. So once we have all of that kind of covered, we just wanted to call out kind of a little bit together here that there's some really cool, more advanced things that we can do with configurations now. Yeah. So you can administer DNS and conditional forwarders in Azure Active Directory Domain Services if you have a managed domain, right? So you can do some pretty advanced DNS things. It's not like Azure DNS is a basic service. It has all the bells and whistles, right? So The other thing to think about, and when I put the video together, I'll do a little bit of a highlight or something on the URLs to make them easy for people to screen grab. But and of course, please check out our video feeds for that on YouTube and things like that, because it's awfully hard on SoundCloud with audio only to see the video feed. But
unless you have a very active imagination.
Yeah, you know what? If that works for all of us, then let's do that. It's always fun to think about those things. But the last thing I wanted to call out was VNet, or virtual network design considerations and configuration options, of course, for Azure AD domain services. I don't want to get into the weeds with this one. We kind of mentioned that. We can definitely get pretty detailed in talking about this, and then we talk about VNet peering. And we kind of get off topic from DNS pretty fast with this one, but it's really critical to remember that you have a lot of tie-ins and everything is interrelated. And it's part of why we love talking about things like this in this podcast, because it is so interconnected. Azure and M365 services, now we find Azure DNS is part of this mix as well for our Microsoft Cloud. And I just think it's really cool. But that said, Ryan, thank you so much for joining us today. Where can we find you if we want to learn a little bit more?
Yeah, so I can be found on YouTube and on LinkedIn at Microsoft Cloud Quick Fix, great big long word. I can be found on Twitter at MSCQF. I can be found online at some point real soon, so I don't get pestered by Andrew, at www.mscqf.com. And there you will find all the information for Microsoft Cloud Quick Fix. And yourself, Andrew.
One of the other things is I just want to mention, make sure you're checking out Ryan's YouTube feed as well, Microsoft Cloud Quick Fix on YouTube. He publishes a lot of other content, not just the stuff that you and I do together, right? But you do a lot of other things, and as do I. I do my own other stuff as well. So come check us out. Check out Ryan's feed. It's really awesome. And thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And take care.
Thanks again, Andrew. Take care.
Thank you so much.